What is incremental morality? It is a new term that I have conceived of to increase the morality of degenerate peoples who are divorced from the truth and logic and are not even able to entertain the idea of having principles. What principles should we have? The Jews have an answer to this because they would say that the 10 Commandments are for them and the 7 Noahide laws are for Gentiles, meaning that they are the ones who set and maintain standards in the same way that if you are a parent enforcing bedtime at 7 for your children, then your bedtime cannot be the same time or earlier than the bedtime of the children on whom you wish to enforce bedtime. And this is really the purpose of the chosen people. They were chosen to set and maintain standards. Sadly for them, they have forgotten the purpose for which they were chosen, and they are also degenerate. They are degenerate because to be of full legal capacity, you have to know who you are and know what you're supposed to do. The key features of knowing who you are is to not be suffering from amnesia or dementia. To suffer from amnesia is to not know your own history or understand your purpose. And that is to not know your identity, not to know your parentage, your extended family, your religion, the religion in particular of your community. So it seems that many people are orphaned from their traditions because they have been told that marriage is just a piece of paper, no better than toilet paper that serves no particular purpose other than to trap you into some unwanted commitment. Back to the subject of incremental morality. What is a minimum of morality that we ought to have? I would say, again, that it is the Noahide laws, and the Noahide laws have a number of concepts that people are not really clear about, particularly Christians and those who consider themselves to be liberals, and that would be most Westerners. One of the behaviours that the Noahide laws forbid is sexual immorality. That is not defined properly, and obviously there are a number of disagreements about that over the ages. Differing punishments and differing offences. We know that Judaism punishes sexual immorality very harshly, with stoning for adulterers and sodomites and those who indulge in bestiality. We also know that Islam punishes extramarital sex with corporal punishment, and this has not exactly been unknown in the Middle Ages in Europe and even in America. In the time of the early Americans, because that practice came over from England. Probably sexual immorality is too difficult a subject for many people to be dealing with, to what's the expression? It would be biting off more than one can chew at this stage to attempt to discuss sexual immorality when most people are suffering from amnesia and dementia and not even knowing if they are male or female, or whether they are the slaves of God or not, or even deciding whether it is better to know that we are the slaves of God, if we are indeed the slaves of God. Now, earlier, someone was taking me to task for even talking about incremental morality, because he seemed to think that incremental immorality means incremental immorality. Why would I do such a thing? I am such a stickler for principles, and have been going on and on and on about having principles. So why on earth do you think I would want to dilute them is really beyond me, other than to assume that you don't listen properly and you certainly don't understand properly. Now, incremental morality is really for people right at the bottom, unable to even bring themselves to discuss concepts such as sexual morality. Westerners are unable to discuss sexual immorality because they already know they are the worst of people as regards sexual immorality, and so it is too much for them at this stage to accept that they are bottom of the heap, so to speak. So what are the smaller steps for Westerners that they could be taking towards incremental morality, towards becoming a society that adheres to the minimum moral standard of universal morality which Jews have conceived of through the no-hide laws? What the Ten Commandments? Well, actually, what the no-hide laws do not say, because it is implicit, is that we are all required to speak the truth and exercise logic, and therefore we should be on notice that our government is not what it should be if it requires us to not speak the truth as we see it. Now, the Quran allows, in chapter 2, verse 256, the right. It allows us the right to freedom of belief and freedom of expression. And this means it supports the First Amendment. And this means it does not support thought crime legislation. And therefore it means legislation forbidding discrimination, which is an act of thought, is in fact un-Islamic. So the whole point of bargain between God and man is that God has given man free will, and therefore we are allowed to choose to believe or not believe, and therefore no blasphemy laws can be allowed, because to forbid blasphemy means to deprive us of our free will. Because if we are punished for saying what we believe to be the truth, then we will soon learn not to speak the truth as we see it, for fear of losing our jobs, our liberty, or even our lives. And we know that Christians practiced heretic burning in order that the divine right of kings can never be questioned with impunity. And this is the history of the European, and this explains why he hates Christianity with such visceral intensity. But this is one aspect of his history that he does not quite understand, and which the British government does not want us to discuss, because the British government is a government of a constitutional monarchy which it wishes to keep in order to be useful to the global empire that is America. Is it possible that King Charles does not understand his role in the matter? Does he really wish to be of service to the evil empire? This is not to say that I am saying all empires are evil, but we can tell when an empire has become evil when it starts to promote the policies of Sodom and Gomorrah, and when most people refuse to discuss it. And that's why you get so many people on X who talk about nonsense, talk about irrelevant non-entities that will never get anywhere, because on the one hand they want to be known as political commentators, on the other they are too afraid to say anything that would bring them to the attention of the authorities. And that is by discussing the meaning of words and expressing forbidden views or asking certain questions that our ruling classes do not want to answer. Who are our ruling classes? It may be that we don't have an indigenous ruling class. It may be that if you're European, then the people who are apparently in office and supposed to be your prime minister or president are in fact serving a foreign power, and I don't mean Israel. Now, it is obviously difficult for many people to admit that their country is a vassal state, and even more difficult for the colonials in Australia, Canada and New Zealand to acknowledge that they are just a vassal state of a vassal state. So what can people at the bottom of the heap in terms of absolute morality, what are they to do? If the 7 no-hide laws are the minimum moral standard for any decent society to have, what are you to do when you break 3 out of 7? If you break 4 out of 7, then you really have failed the test. So The three prohibitions that I'm referring to are the prohibition against idolatry, the prohibition against blasphemy, and the prohibition against sexual morality. And possibly Western countries are already breaking 4 of them, because there is a positive commandment to ensure that your court and legal system administers justice. Because if you don't even do that, then it is only a matter of time before you are overthrown. If your court and legal system doesn't work and isn't seen by the majority to provide justice, then what are you for? Why would any wealthy person bother with paying legal fees to sort their problems out? Why not just go and shoot somebody in the street, as some CEO in America was shot in the street for apparently not paying out on medical insurance claims? So as regards incremental morality, the least we can do is speak the truth as we see it. Even if we are wrong, if we speak the truth as we see it, we are in a better position to either correct ourselves or be corrected when we discover that everyone else disagrees with us and we cannot, however hard we try, come up with sound arguments with which to win our argument. The other little thing that we could try to do would be to exercise logic. That might be a little harder, since most people don't seem to care about it, and even educated people such as Jen Sharp didn't understand the difference, didn't know the difference between a valid and a sound argument. So, as regards incremental morality, we must take, or you must take, the baby steps towards speaking the truth as you see it and knowing the difference between valid and sound arguments. What are valid arguments? Valid arguments are arguments that would be logical if its premises were true. A good example would be, if all toasters were made of gold, then toasters would be valuable objects. But we know toasters are not made of gold, and therefore toasters are not valuable objects. In the case of a sound argument, an example would be, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, Jesus was also a man, therefore Jesus and Socrates were mortal and are now deceased. And this means it would be absurd to worship deceased men, particularly if they have been convicted and crucified for blasphemy. And this is something Christians need to consider, to resolve, to come to terms with, and ask themselves why they, on the one hand, claim to believe in God and the afterlife, and on the other hand, do the very thing that God has forbidden. It makes no sense, unless the answer is that they are just hypocrites, pretending to worship an executed blasphemer, if only to obtain the protection of Christianity. But then we already know that Christianity is the most despised religion in its own homelands of Europe. So it makes no sense. As for Americans who think it is a good idea to convert to Orthodox Christianity, I'm afraid they are not quite getting the idea that when you're in a hole, stop digging. If you're in the hole of low white birth rates, do not do something that would make your white birth rates go even lower. So what is the point of becoming a kind of Christian that can only marry a very small group of Christians whose congregation are not known to have large numbers of men of fighting age or women of childbearing age? Why, when you are in a corner, paint yourself even further into a corner? While if these white people who want to increase white birth rates were being logical and sensible, they would have discovered before being told by me that Muslim men are allowed to marry Jewesses and Christian women as well as Muslim women. So white nationalists should know that by converting to Islam, they significantly increase their chances of marrying a woman someone of the opposite sex, of childbearing age, sharing their values. Because if you're worried about not having enough white babies, then you should be doing things that would put you in touch with larger numbers of potential spouses. But what do these white nationalists do instead? They join Orthodox Christianity, probably thinking, well, at least most of them are going to be white, but forgetting to take into account that although most of the congregation might be white, they are not of childbearing age or of fighting age if they are men. So these are they mentally deficient? Are they just not capable of forming logical conclusions, or even accepting them if you point out things to them? Are they not capable of putting two and two together, even though you have so patiently explained simple arithmetic to them? Thank you, Teo, for pointing out that my volume is very low. Let me see what I can do about it. Audio. Why is it so low? Is this better? I hope it's better. Anyway, thank you for pointing this out. I don't know what's happened. I haven't fiddled around with it. Anyway, Let me just go back to what I was saying before I go. Yes, so in terms of incremental morality, I'm just thank you for saying it's better, Teo. Um, did you want to say hi and tell and join me? I've just finished what I was going to say. I'll give you a few minutes to decide whether you want to join me or not, and if not, I will just, well, I'm going to quickly summarise what I have been saying, which is that if you find it too difficult to discuss the definition of sexual morality and the ones that you might be guilty of, then at least consider trying to speak truth as you see it, and to exercise logic in making your arguments. Teo has decided to join me. Welcome, welcome, Teo.
What's going on, Claire? What's
I suppose I should be doing a bit more in the Christmas, in the run up to Christmas, but I will do so later after this. How have you been?
I am well, thank you. I heard you mention Orthodox. People going to Orthodoxy expecting to find um, white women of age-bearing age, but not. Can you lay out the case you were making for me so I can have some grasp?
Oh right. Well, I did say in one of my shorts. I don't know if you've seen my shorts. Have you seen my shorts of me being a marble statue?
I don't think I have though.
Okay, well, okay, I quite like them because it's only 1 minute, and one of them just sort of immediately had over 300 views, but not the others. But anyway, I did mention Orthodox Christianity in 1 minute. Um, but basically, I'm saying that a lot of white people who are social conservatives think their church is too liberal, and so if they're Lutheran or Protestant, they go towards Catholicism, and then they find that Pope is liberal, and so they go towards Putin's Christianity, and it probably as a show of hatred for their own government and their own church institutions. And then they discover how strict Orthodox Christianity is, because it actually forbids them from marrying other kinds of Christians or even visiting other kinds of churches. And then when they do join, they discover that there aren't that many people they might want to marry, or there aren't women of childbearing age or men of fighting age within the congregation. So they have painted themselves into a corner, and when I point this out to them, they're just refusing to acknowledge it. And then I said, if you are a Muslim man, you're actually allowed to marry Jewesses and Christian women as well as Muslim women.
Are they not allowed to do that as a Christian, as an Orthodox Christian?
No, they can't marry any other kind of Christian.
I think you're pointing out something true. There are way more Ortho bros than Ortho gals.
Although sisters, yes.
Yeah, but I know at least three uh, young couple that met in the Orthodox Church.
Oh, do you know Natty?
I do know Natty.
Yeah, she's the one. I mean, she's kind of queen of ortho bros, but she's
You know
wrong
what?
to me on X.
Really, I did not know that you and Natty, but it does not surprise me at all. Actually, now that I think about it, I can see exactly how your paths would have crossed.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
to be a fly on the wall. Yes. Okay, so I was actually I spoke to Natty was earlier this week, and I wanted to record a conversation with her for Randers United. And I think eventually I would like to get you and Nat together for a conversation because you're both.
You wanted to ask her to do a recording of something united. What did you say? Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't quite catch.
yeah, yes, and I do still plan on doing that with Natty.
Sorry, you said something united, but I didn't catch the
It's
word before.
that's the name of the channel is Randos United.
Oh, Randos United. Oh, yeah, yeah. Of course, I know it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um.
And the origin of that is Paul van der Clay talking to randos, and that was quite a popular.
Well, yeah. Paul Vanderklay was talking to Randos, and there were too many Randos for just Paul Vanderklay to talk to all of them. So the Randos started talking to each other. That's the origins of Randos United.
Right, right. Yes.
But yeah, Natty's been. I've been having conversations with her, and she's been very much tracking the Orthodox Eastern Orthodox revival, and now that lines up with the social conservative movements online, at least. And where the rubber meets the road is when those online people start coming into churches and have to adhere to the rules of Christianity, not the rules of online Christianity.
Right. So, do you know that she is fighting with Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Wilson of America?
Well, yeah, I know she's on a warpath with Christian nationalism, and I can imagine the Wilsons being symbolic of that movement.
Yeah, because Andrew Wilson is basically, showing his hatred of Muslims, and because he's debated quite a few of them. Actually, I was on his channel once, and then he just deleted our exchange, so that was a bit annoying. But anyway, yes, I have come across him,
Yeah,
and yeah.
I don't I yeah, you and Natty would be interesting conversation partners, and I think would definitely require a moderator. So I look if I can make that happen, I would love to.
Well, I've spoken to her a few times before she blocked me because I mean, basically, um, we were actually disagreeing about words because I go on about matriarchy and patriarchy, and she thought it was ridiculous that I was describing society now as matriarchy because she seems to think that patriarchy exists when powerful men are in charge, and all the men she can think of, sorry, all the powerful people she can think of are men. And I'm saying no, patriarchy is a society that prioritizes the preferences of married parents who want to properly parent their legitimate offspring, and matriarchy is a society prioritizing the preferences of unmarried parents who casually conceived and parented their illegitimate offspring. And I'm saying that is the clear blue water. And then you can sort of judge objectively, what kind of society you have.
Yeah, my introduction to Natty was having the patriarchy conversation in Discord, going up against everyone else, which I thought was hilarious.
So do you agree with Natty?
On what?
I
On
mean,
which?
okay, what do you and Natty disagree about? I know, well, you're both Christians.
Well, she's an Orthodox Christian. I'm not, so that's a start.
Yeah, but I mean, is there something that you two disagree about?
I'm sure there are many things we disagree about, but I don't front load disagreements, especially with someone that I don't know in real life. But yes, of course, there are many things we disagree about.
No, because I was just sort of wondering why,
It's there are crusades that she's on that I'm not on. For example, a crusade against Christian nationalism. I find interesting, but I don't know enough. She's done a lot more deep dive than I have, so I'm more interested in learning what she's found out from her deep dives. Just like I
Well,
was with you, Claire.
right. Well. I mean, I like to consider myself the expert on nationalism on both sides of the Atlantic, since I do spend most of my time talking to these people. So I'm basically saying, people who call themselves Christian nationalists are just the smarter kind of white nationalists who has realised that calling yourself a white nationalist gets you nowhere. But if you use Christianity as cover, then you're likely to have more you know people. You're less likely to have people dismiss you and marginalise you and call you a Nazi.
I
So
think
that's the
what
only reason.
Yeah, I'm not. I do see some of that going on in some cases for sure, especially on Twitter. But Twitter is an hellscape, so that's not surprising. Uh, but the reason what I find interesting about pairing you and Nati up for a conversation is uh uh, you're both paying attention to the spiritualism revival on the civilizational scale in terms of people that are going from politics to religion and bringing the politics along with them. You see the politics to be a more the driving motivation, and I think for Nati it's more the religiosity that's the driving motivation. But she's also been along the right for so long that she sees many people that went down the civilization reform route. So it'll be interesting to get you to compare notes on that front.
Well, yeah. I mean, I see religion and politics as the same thing. You know, I mean, it is the same thing, really, if you think about it. It's just that, for people who are not interested in politics, they think they're just being religious. But for people who think, in terms of politics, they see religion as a very helpful tool to make people do things their way.
Yeah, and I've spoken to you for and listened to you enough to know that's they're very much how you the frame you're using to assess things. And I find that I don't agree with that frame, but I definitely find the usefulness of it. I see the usefulness of it.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at, how people are, they do want to change your beliefs. I mean, it's like advertising. It's like buy this, not buy that. Our product is better than all the rest. I mean, every people around you are trying to make you believe certain things in order you do things their way. Our parents, our children, they're all trying to, tell us what to believe, including, of course, our government.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's very much. I don't know if you know Grim Grizz. That's the deep dive he's been doing. Um, and I agree with you completely on that front. But I see that to equal religion is more primal than politics. Not so much that politics is the motivation behind religion, because, like you said, everyone's trying to get you to believe something about them, the product, you, the world you live in. There's constant programming going on from all sides, and I think religion is a better frame to understand beliefs and programming and uh, value structure than politics. I think politics is definitely a trickle down from religion, and I think trying to do it backwards of engineering, which I'd agree with you, it's definitely a tool that the government uses, but I don't think it is effective on an individual front as it is on a global front.
But why not, though? Because, obviously, if you think you're, for example, I mean, in the most important way, on the question of war, you would only fight, join the army if you thought the cause was noble, right? If you trusted your government, if you thought that, the war that your government is sending you to fight is a noble one, but if you thought your government was incompetent and corrupt and didn't care, and are only sending you to fight in some war as cannon fodder, then you wouldn't go.
I disagree. I think you would still go even if you thought the government is corrupt. If you believe that the government is fighting for a bigger cause than just if it's like morality is a bigger, if at the end of the day you believe your actions are gonna affect. I'm thinking specifically of the the kids in the true believers, Palestinian kids that are fighting. That's it's not because they trust in Hamas and their leadership. It's because there's a bigger vision and a bigger motivation that goes beyond just the political leaders.
Well, it's their hatred of Jews. They are motivated by their hatred of Jews.
And that's no, that's religion, not it's not hatred of Jews for hatred of Jews' sake. It's hatred of Jews. If that is the case, and that's that's downstream of religion, not politics. I guess is the argument I would make. Even if that is the case, it's not downstream. It's not political reasons because that they hate the Jews. It's not purely political.
Well, I mean, politics is sort of like prioritizing conflicting demands. And, sometimes okay, actually, I've spoken to lots of people who've said to me, I would rather die than do what you propose. And I thought, that's quite interesting because you're saying you're prepared to die for your, for your incorrect opinions because you hate my idea so much. So, on the one hand, you're actually acknowledging that your opinion is not quite correct. But because you hate my idea so much, you would rather die than do things my way. I mean, this is my interpretation of their reaction. So, so you have to work out, why they're doing what they're doing and why they're saying what they're saying.
Yeah,
So it might not be, that they even think you're wrong. It's just that they hate the truth so much that they would rather die than admit it.
that's why I think faith is a more powerful tool than rationality. Like rational, logical arguments, it doesn't really move people as much as we like to pretend that it does.
Yeah, but then that's only because, I am worshipping my own dumb opinions. I'm not going to admit that I was wrong to have hated Jews all my life, and have to and blame them for every single bloody thing that went wrong, and it's like the longer you have been wrong, the less likely you are to admit it. That's why people think, oh, children are so malleable because, they're not committed to any, incorrect path because they haven't been around that long. It's only the old people that you say, just won't see things. Because, it means having to admit that they've been wrong all their lives.
What's when and how do you admit when you're wrong? What's how do you know when you're wrong?
When I can't think of logical arguments, or when, I can't, it, I was thinking of, I was going to say, like the earth is round and not flat, but then you get these, these stupid debates of flat earthers. And I think the only useful thing that these debates take is that if the burden of proof is on the person claiming that the earth is round, then it's quite easy for, a flat earther to win the argument. If you're the one having to prove that the earth is round.
I think that's actually a really good example. Yes, I agree with that. That's that I think that shows that even the person that believes that the earth is round, like most people do, is exercising an amount of faith that rationality cannot bridge the gap between what they believe and why they believe. And I think that's the usefulness of the flat earth types. It helps you to truly investigate. Okay, do I really have rational arguments for the things that I believe, or do I have rational arguments up to a point, then I make a leap of faith?
Yeah, and maybe it's not possible to know for sure if God exists, right? I mean, we're going back to religion again, but it's like you look around and you think, well, quite a lot of people believe in God, or my community is Christian, or whatever. So you won't feel weird for being Christian if your community is Christian, but you might feel weird for being Christian if you're surrounded by Jews. So, and then it's like, oh, well, I better go and find myself a Christian community if I want to hang on to my beliefs. And this is basically how things work. I mean, our entire adult lives is about, working out which gang to join.
To an extent, yes, but the Christian firm is, and I'm a Protestant. This is you very much. It's not dependent on the community. It's an individual decision. So even if you are a Christian surrounded by Jews, if you're a Christian, the goal isn't to start to go find a community of like-minded people. The goal is to be a Christian in the world that you're in. Be in the world, but not of the world. That's the Christian command. So that's why the civilization argument really doesn't. Um, they're using religion as a tool for rebuilding civilization. I don't think works well with my understanding of Christianity. Not that
But
it's
don't
not
you
been
need to
tried
be with
or
other
will be tried
Christians?
in future.
Sorry, what did you say?
I was just saying, not that it's not been tried or will be tried again in the future. Uh, that being using Christianity as a tool for building civilization and yeah, civilization.
Sorry,
But
I didn't understand.
what
Are
was
you
what was
saying
what
that?
was your question?
Um, I've forgotten what you were talking. I think you were saying that you don't need to be surrounded by Christians to remain Christian, and I was going to contradict you by saying, surely eventually you will just merge into, the community that you live in, and adopt their values and their practices and their customs. If you're just one Christian surrounded by Jews.
I agree. It would be much easier to be a Christian amongst other Christians. Um, let me rephrase that. There will be less pull. It will be easier for you to know how to be a Christian amongst other Christians. That's absolutely true.
Yeah,
Uh,
because you affirm each other's identity. It's like, oh
yes,
yeah, see
yeah.
you in church, and you know, and
And you've got yes, a three chord bond is better than one. So yes, absolutely to that. But that's Christianity is different because whilst that is majority of the time, yes, um, you become a better Christian by being amongst other Christians. That's not the norm. That's not law. It's not. So if you are a Christian and you find yourself in a place surrounded by no Christians, your job is just to still keep being Christian where you are, unless you get sent somewhere else. I'm thinking in the context of missionaries in the earlier Christian age that will go away from the Christian community into places where there are no Christians to spread the gospel. That's also a part of the Christian faith is doing that.
well, yes, but then these people understand that they're on a mission, and the idea is not for them to adopt the customs and practices of the place they go to.
Yeah,
So these
but
people have
that's
a
true for
mission.
every Christian. Every Christian understands that you are on a mission. You are a stranger in a foreign land waiting for the return of the king to fix everything. It's not even the Christian communities that you're in understand as a community you are not living in the world that God created the way God would like it to be. Like there are still evil still exists, and you have to deal with that.
Yeah, and Muslims also have the same missionizing objective because that's what they do at Speaker's Corner. They are supposed to invite non-Muslims to Islam, but I suppose the best religion is one that is easy to believe. I mean, you can say, well, you could be surrounded by.
But there's no Martin Luther in Islam. There's no there's no Reformation. There wasn't a time where in a world where Muslim everyone was Muslim, few Muslims stood up and say no, 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 we are not Muslim in right, and we don't need this institution to Muslim.
Well, you're comparing potatoes with apples, really, because
Exactly. That's the point I'm making. So that's when you group the potato and the apple together as being both tools for civilization. I'm like, no, Christianity is not like that. Christianity is very much anti being used for civilization building. Every time it's been done, it doesn't work. It collapses.
what do you mean civilization building?
For example, if I understand secular Quranism correctly, it's a manual for giving opioid to the masses that will make people get along better than they currently are. And the opioid is religion, is a diet version of Islam, a secularized version of Islam.
Well, actually, it's really about making sure people marry before having children and making sure they understand that that is really what they must do to stop becoming more corrupt and degenerate and yeah, and more impoverished. So that is the real purpose of secular Quranism, because but the secular Quranism doesn't say, oh, you have to believe this or you're not a secular Quranist. It just says, if you can understand why these rules are meant to make your society better, because obviously children will be better parented if they are parented in a two-parent home, then you will have less crime and more children who will enter the labour force, and there will be less of a demand for immigrant labour, which everybody is complaining about. Um, and so I'm just sort of making everyone understand that it is about gender relations that Islam is better at regulating. And Christians used to believe in no sex before marriage and all that sort of thing, but what I think has happened for Christians is that um, that was fine as long as the government was supporting marriage. And this Western governments have stopped doing. And that kind of, well, I think that perfectly explains their decline. Because really, your children are your wealth. Because if you're an aging and shrinking society, you're going to be in trouble and people will take advantage of you, knowing that you are aging and shrinking and getting stupider and weaker and more neurotic, and yeah, more gay and just sort of unable to get on with each other. Because when we started talking about the Orthodox Christians, it's like the fact is white people don't like each other and can't get on with each other. Even before all this, what did they do? They just killed each other at the drop of a hat. We forget, we may complain about their racism and militarism, but when they were all white and Christian in Europe, they were pretty horrible to each other. In fact, they fought two world wars with each other.
There were time when people weren't horrible to each other.
Yeah, and I'm saying the whole point of Christianity was to defend the divine right of kings, because that was what it was. I mean, why do you think Constantine the Great adopted Christianity? Because if you look at Roman history, in okay, a century before he was born, you would know that Rome was just stuffed with warlords who were generals who wanted to be emperor of Rome. And there was even a year of the five emperors, which was basically five warlords trying to be, emperor of Rome. And Constantine thought, oh dear, this Roman religion of ours is not working because nobody believes in it. So, the old imperial Roman cult was to worship the emperor when he died, because that was how they operated, and obviously nobody believed that the emperor had become God. So they basically did what they liked and thought they could get away with. And Constantine thought, well, maybe if they believed in a merciful Jesus, who was a son of the Abrahamic God, they might behave better. So he adopted it, but it didn't stop Rome from decline and fall. And then after Rome fell, obviously there were all these barbarian kingdoms of Europe who thought, well, without the divine right of kings, we're just warlords and nobody will respect us, because they'll think, well, we're just good at fighting wars, but we're not very nice people. So if we use the divine right of kings, which the Pope in Rome will dress us up and say that we're good people and listen to him, and we'll be guided by the advice of cardinals and popes. So they went along with this for a few more 100 years until they destroyed themselves after two world wars, because they clearly couldn't get on with each other.
I think a few things happened between Constantine and the Second World War, but
Yeah,
given your
like the
frame,
wars of the Reformation,
yep,
which was pretty terrible too.
yep,
Did you
and
know Hansel and Gretel came from that,
oh,
from the wars of the Reformation?
I didn't. Tell me the story if you can, please.
Well, basically, the first 30 Years' War, the 30 Years' War was one of the worst wars of, well, the worst war of the Reformation, because so many people committed cannibalism that it wasn't even worth punishing them after it had ended, because even more Europeans would be, would have died if you wanted to kill people for being cannibals.
Oh, bear with me.
I'll let Teo finish his call. Well, thank you, Rude, for wishing us Merry Karani Yule. The same to you too. What I was going to say about the wars of the 30 Years' War was, yeah, it was so bad. But anyway, the story of Hansel and Gretel was about Hansel and Gretel being abandoned in the forest by their parents who couldn't afford to feed them. And then they found and so the first time they were abandoned by their parents in the woods, they found their way back because Hansel had pebbles in his pocket so he could find his way home after their parents tried to abandon them. And then the second time he had only had breadcrumbs, but obviously the animals had eaten them. So they got lost, and then they found a beautiful house, well, a cottage that was made of sweets and candy. And they went in, and inside lived a witch who wanted to roast them. That you will find stories online about adults who tried to entrap children so they could kill them and eat them. But let me, I better check the story. Hansel and Gretel are the young children of a poor woodcutter. When a famine settles over the land, the woodcutter's second wife tells him to take the children into the woods and leave them there to fend for themselves. The woodcutter opposes the plan, but his wife repeats her demands until he reluctantly agrees. They are unaware that in the children's bedroom, Hansel and Gretel have overheard them. After the parents have gone to bed, Hansel sneaks out of the house and gathers as many shiny white pebbles as he can, then returns to his room, reassuring Gretel that God will not forsake them. The next day, the children's stepmother gives them small pieces of bread before she and their father take them into the woods. As the family walks deeper, Hansel leaves a trail of white pebbles. After their parents abandon them, the children stay in the woods until night falls and the moonlight reveals the white pebbles shining in the dark. The children then safely follow the trail back home, much to their stepmother's rage. Once again, provisions become scarce, and the stepmother angrily orders her husband to take the children further into the woods and leave them there. Hansel attempts to gather more pebbles, but his stepmother has locked the door. The following morning, the children's stepmother gives them smaller pieces of bread before she and their father take them into the woods. As the family treks, Hansel leaves a trail of breadcrumbs for him and Gretel to follow back home. However, after they are once again abandoned, the children find that the birds have eaten the crumbs and they are lost in the woods. After 3 days of wandering, the children follow a dove to a clearing in the woods and discover a cottage with bread walls and a cape roof and sugar windows. Hungry and tired, the children begin to eat the house. When the door opens and the elderly woman that lives there emerges and takes the children inside, giving them delicious food to eat and soft beds to sleep in. What the children do not know is that their kind hostess is an evil witch who had built the bread house to lure them inside so she can cook and eat them. The next morning, the witch locks Hansel in a stable and enslaves Gretel. The witch feeds Hansel regularly to fatten him up, but serves Gretel nothing but crab shells. The witch then tries to touch Hansel's finger to see how fat he has become, but he cleverly offers a thin bone he found in the cage. As the witch's eyes are too weak to notice the deception, she is fooled into thinking Hansel is still too thin for her to eat. After 4 weeks of this, the witch grows impatient and decides to eat Hansel anyway. She prepares the oven for Hansel, but decides she is hungry enough to eat Gretel too. She coaxes Gretel to the open oven and asks her to lean over in front of it to see if the fire is hot enough. Gretel, sensing the witch's intent, pretends she does not understand what the witch means. Frustrated, the witch demonstrates, and Gretel instantly shoves her into the hot oven, slams and bolts the door shut, leaving the witch to burn to death. Gretel frees Hansel from the stable, and the pair discover boxes full of pearls and precious stones. Putting the jewels into their pockets, the children set off home. A white duck or swan, in some versions, ferries them across an expanse of water, and at home they find only their father. His mother had died from an unknown cause. The children's father had spent all his days missing them and is delighted to see them safe and sound. With a witch's wealth, the children and their father all live happily ever after. Is Teo still on his call? I can read about the 30 Years' War then. Years' War, cannibalism, in case you think I'm making it up. Yes, cannibalism was reported during the 30 Years' War, a devastating conflict that lasted from 1618 to 1648. Contemporary records describe the famine and starvation that occurred during the war, and the church received reports of cannibalism. The 30 Years' War was a conflict that pitted Catholics against Protestants, Lutherans against Calvinists, and Catholics against Catholics across the Holy Roman Empire. The war resulted in the deaths of an estimated 4.5 to 8 million soldiers and civilians from battle, famine, or disease. So, I can find you the origin of the story of Hansel and Gretel. The story's abandonment and battle with the witch may have been inspired by the Great Famine of 1315 to 21. During this time, poor families couldn't afford to keep their children, and some chose to starve to death or abandon them. Yeah, there are lots of fairy tales based on these stories. Yep. So Teo is, I guess, still on his phone. I guess I could keep talking. Now, what was he saying that I disagreed with? He was saying, well, actually, he was agreeing with me that beliefs are crucial in. Okay, we're more likely to agree. We're more likely to agree with each other if we share the same beliefs. I mean, it is possible to still agree with each other, even though we don't share the same beliefs. For example, atheists and ethical monotheists, because even atheists can agree with ethical monotheists not to steal or kill. But then they wouldn't agree with each other to not practice idolatry or blaspheme. So we have to ask ourselves whether we are, how likely we are to obey these laws. Obviously, if we agree with the rules, if we all agree to live under, a set of rules, then we're more likely to live in harmony than if we didn't. It is the nature of things that your country, your government could say, right, we're going to live under Sharia now, for example, or a Torah theocracy, and we can assume that not everybody will agree to it. So even Jews might not, or well, we know they wouldn't all agree to live under Torah theocracy, because not all Jews are religious Jews, and quite a few of them are liberal and atheist. And if you're atheist and liberal, you won't agree to adhere to the strict standards of sexual morality promoted by Orthodox Jews and Muslims. So this is the potential for disagreement. And as I was saying earlier, sexual immorality is as long as a piece of string. I'm not saying atheists don't have any sense of sexual morality. I'm sure they know it's not a good idea to rape people, for example. But then what about crimes short of rape, such as fornication, sodomy and adultery? They might think it's perfectly all right to have sex with their siblings or people they're not married to or people of the same sex, while religious people would not agree that it is okay. But basically, going back to the no-hide laws, the point of the no-hide laws is for Jews to ensure that Gentiles worship the same Abrahamic God as they do. And if they did worship the same Abrahamic God, then they would be more likely to adhere to the 5 no-hide laws that are not the prohibitions against idolatry and blasphemy. I hope that I have made myself reasonably clear about incremental morality. So basically, sexual morality is too hard for the degenerate to discuss. So I recommend that they take smaller steps towards righteousness, and that is to try and speak the truth as they see it and exercise logic when they make their arguments and submit to truth and logic, if not to morality. Thank you for your attention.